I lived for the first 18 years of my life outside of India. And when I was 12, we lived in Indonesia. And I remember, I have a terrible memory, so I don't remember much. But I do remember this moment when I was sitting in our garden in Indonesia, and I had a diary at that time, and I was writing in my diary. And years later, when I started my organization, Akanksha, I was trying to prepare something different for a staff meeting. And so I went through all these old papers and documents, and I found this diary. And I think what I'm going to share with you is not a very good poem. It's a poem I wrote. I was just 12. But in my mind, it sowed the seeds for what I was going to do later. Yeah? So that poem, and this goes back a long time, 1983, said, I reached to touch a rainbow today. I reached up high, so high. And yet as high as I reached up, I could not touch the sky. I'll reach to touch a rainbow again. I'll reach up higher than high. And if I try to reach up high, I just may skim the sky. So I felt very, very lucky that at the age of 12, I sort of knew what I wanted to do. And from 12, every summer vacation, I would volunteer. And in retrospect, I can now connect the dots. At that time, I didn't really know what motivated me to do it. But every summer, I spent my summers working with kids who were visually impaired, hearing impaired. When we lived in the US, I worked with autistic kids. When we lived in Indonesia, I worked with really severely handicapped kids who lived in an orphanage. And I just remember lots and lots of joy. Just really like loving being around kids and knowing that like somewhere like this is what I'm going to do. But when I was 18, I came back to India, and it was again very random, like the giving out of the flowers. I was here, and I'd finished my first year at Tufts University, and I was about to go back for my second year, and my family had already gone. I had my flight booked to go a week later, and I walked into a community, and luckily, I actually had a camera with me on the first day that I ever went into a community, and this is the first child that I met. Her name's Pinky. I have no idea where she is, and it's not a great picture, but I want you to just look at her. Looking at Pinky's eyes were really symbolic of what I believed. They were sparkling and shining and bright, and they spoke to me of potential. And as I walked into the community, I expected to feel a lot of things. I expected to feel really saddened by the poverty, really upset because I had lived a life of a lot of privilege, and I'd had every possible thing I wanted growing up and all the support ever. I grew up not knowing that there were problems in the world. And when I go into a community, I just felt that something's wrong. Like something's really wrong in a world where so many kids are denied the opportunity to meet their potential. And so I would walk in the community and yes, saddened by the dirt and the filth and the poverty, but much more than that, I'd be surprised by the resourcefulness, the resilience, the gratitude that I saw in spaces where I would constantly say, but if I was in that position, like, really, like, what would I do, you know? And what would I be able to do with my life? And so Pinky, I lost touch with her a couple of years after I met her, but she remains a really big inspiration to me and just a symbol of the potential that's there in every single child in our country. And like, I really believe that I want to spend my life working so that every kid in the country has the opportunity to be sitting where you are today. Right? Like, why can't that be possible for every single kid? It's the kind of opportunities that you and I had growing up. A safe space to be kids, a place where they can explore who they want to be, and a place where they can just have fun, where they're not burdened with things that an 8-year-old and 10-year-old kid are not supposed to be burdened with. So that's how we started. It was a very, very, very simple idea, Akanksha. Basically, I said, like, we don't need to do anything. Everything we need exists in our country. All we need to do is create a platform to bring these things together. So I saw resources everywhere. the biggest resource I saw were the kids and the minds and hearts of just hundreds and thousands of kids who needed to be educated, more importantly, who wanted to be educated. And I thought, what a resource, right? At the same time, I'd come back from the US and I was in Xavier's College and nobody went to class. And it shocked me because at Tufts University, everyone attended class. Xavier's College, everyone sat in the canteen. And then 1 month before the exams, everyone would go out, buy their textbooks, and start attending class. And I would look around at all these like young, driven, high energy, bright people, and then I'd see all these huge problems in the country, and somewhere I was like, this is not making sense, right? So that was the second resource. Bright, young, talented people who maybe just needed to get fired up about a mission, right? And it was fascinating for me because I would go around in the canteen and I would see you in India, you know? And everyone had an answer. Like, for some, it was like the environment, gender, corruption, education, health. And then my next question would be, so, like, why aren't you doing anything about it? And the response, like 99% of the time, was we really want to do something about it. We don't know what to do. We don't know how we as one person can make a difference. So it just seemed really easy to me. We have kids who need to be educated. We have young college students who are unbelievably bright and can educate. Let's bring them together. Okay, Bombay, difficult to find spaces, but again, I saw resources everywhere. So in a place where you have to really look for space and Bombay is so cramped, I began to realize that so many schools run in single shifts. What's happening to those classrooms after school hours, right? So again, that seemed like an untapped resource. And then my belief always has been, if you do what you need to do well, with the right intent, money's gonna come, right? And we didn't need much money. First 5 years, we were all volunteers anyway. So Akanksha was just about bringing together these things. We started our first small center. Again, it's another funny story, similar to what Aditya said. I went to 20 different schools trying to find classrooms to house our first Akanksha center. All 20 schools said no. It renewed my faith in what I needed to do because school principals, these were like high-end, rich convent school principals, were saying things like, this idea is very revolutionary, and I'm thinking, really? I mean, I know it was 20 years ago, but basic education was not a revolutionary idea. They were saying things like, our kids in the morning will get diseases from sitting on the same benches as your kids. So I realized very early on that the biggest fights were going to be not the work, not the collecting of resources, but the changing of mindsets. And the 20th school I went to, I was about to give up. And I walked into Father Emil de Cruz's office. I didn't know Father Emil de Cruz. This was the Holy Name School in Mumbai. And I walked in and I said, I've used this line a lot in my life. It's a good line to remember. Father, my life is in your hands, you know, and poor Father was so taken aback that he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you know, if I don't get a classroom, I have this idea, there are these kids who want to be educated, but frankly, it's all in your hands, like whether they get educated or not depends on whether you give us these classrooms or not. So we started, and I found the minute we started, like people jump on board, right? So when Father met me and he said yes, he said, so when do you want to start? And I said, tomorrow. And I had no clue of how we'd start the next day. I didn't have teachers. I didn't have a bus. I'd identified some group of kids, but I didn't even know if they would come. But I was so terrified that if I gave him more time, he'd change his mind and take away the space that I just said, we have to start tomorrow. And I went back to college and I sat with my friends, most of whom really had no interest in kids at all. And I said, can you just pretend like you love kids and just come in and pretend to be teachers so that Father like thinks that we're a real team, you know, and in the meantime, I'll find teachers. And it was literally that. Like I'd walk around with hand-painted posters saying, you can make a difference from classroom to classroom and sign up volunteers. And really that's sort of how we started. And I would just ask myself again and again, like, what's the right model to reach all kids? What do you do? Understanding, as we did, that there's no simple answer, not like franchising a McDonald's, right? Education by its nature is a deep, hard, long process. How do you do that for 320 million kids in the country? And And when we actually thought about answering that question, we came up with a really sort of startling, different answer. We said, actually, the problem's a leadership gap. The leaders in our country today don't care about solving that problem. There isn't enough will, there isn't enough skill to actually solve that problem amongst our leaders across sectors. What is it going to take for our politicians to care about this, for our educators to care about this, for our academics to care about this, for our lawyers to care about this? How do we make that happen? How do we build that movement of leaders? So when I think about that, like the idea that like 90% of our potential as a nation is not being maximized, like I really feel a little bit sick in my stomach. Right? It makes me really, really angry. And it makes me angry for many, many reasons. I'm just going to share two. One is like a moral obligation, right? Like I have two young daughters. Like what did they do to deserve being born into the situation that they were in? Or what did I do to deserve being born in the situation I did? And what has that child in the slums done to deserve being born there? Nothing. Nothing. It's just a flip of a coin. It's just luck. That's it. And because of that, I feel like a huge moral obligation to say it's just not fair. Like we need to do something so that every single kid has that chance. What they choose to do with that chance is in their hands. We need to give them that chance. And the second reason it makes me so angry is when I think about it from our nation's perspective. When I think of where India is today and where it needs to go, and I think about that loss of potential, that's frightening, right? Like, how can we stand up and feel proud of ourselves as a nation when we know that we live with that kind of inequity? And then on the much more positive side, if you flip that on its head, what a massive opportunity we have. Imagine if every single person in this room was standing at the end of that exercise. Where would we be in our own happiness, in our own lives, and as a nation? And I think that's what drives the work that we actually do. We actually did something at Teach for India this year, and we actually cut out the one day. And we said, you know, one day is sort of like a cop-out, right? Because one day could mean my kids' generation. It could mean anything, right? It could mean different things to all of us. Like one day really doesn't drive urgency. What if we put a stake in the ground and said the average Teach for India fellow today is 22, 23 years old? In their lifetime, we're going to solve this problem. How would that drive a different sense of possibility, a different sense of urgency, a different sense of what it means to like build a movement? Okay? So that's really what we're actually aiming for. And how do we do it? And I think, again, coming back to that idea of leadership, we really believe that if those leaders don't exist in India today, or enough of them don't exist, we just need to create them. There's no reason why the next generation of leaders shouldn't care deeply about this problem, because this is perhaps our nation's greatest evil today, this level of inequity, because it affects every other thing, right? If I'm not educated, it does impact all my other social indicators. Okay? So can we do this at Teach for India? Can we actually build a movement of leaders who will eliminate educational inequity in India? What does that look like? And there's sort of two parts to what we do, right? The first is saying, can I take a group of kids who are 4 years behind, 5 years behind, and say, I believe that you can compete with any child in the country, and that you're going to be at the same level as any other child, irrespective of your background. Can I take you and put you actually on a different life path, right? So your aspirations will change, what you want for yourself will change, and your ability to get there will change. So in our 2 years, we tell our fellows, that's what you need to do. Unbelievably hard thing to do. To stand in front of a group of 40 kids whose lives are in your hands and know that you are going to make the difference between getting them on that trajectory or not is the hardest thing possibly that you can ever do. But then here's the real power of it, the long term. After the 2 years, our belief is that our fellows, and currently there are 509 fellows teaching across 5 cities, right? That our fellows will go out and do anything that they want. Some of them will go into law, into media, into politics, into education. But if they become leaders in those fields, keeping our mission in mind, we can actually change the problem. Because now you're a media leader, but you're thinking about how can I use my position in the media to end educational inequity? And if I'm a politician, I'm thinking about how do I change things for every kid in the country? And if I'm an educator, I'm thinking about how can I run the best possible school for the poorest kids to be able to show people that it's possible. As a problem, what's our natural instinct? Do we pick up a mirror, in which case, like, the problem's me, it's inside me, I need to find a solution in me? Or do I pick up a magnifying glass, in which case, like, the problems are outside me, they're becoming bigger outside me? And I think this struggle and journey of trying as hard as I can in those situations to pick up the mirror and resist the temptation to pick up the magnifying glass has been another really big learning.